Your novel's opening line, why you have to make it count, more than ever in the world that we live in. But how can you do it? What can you do to create the greatest opening line in your book possible? We're going to be dealing with that question and more, and we're starting right now. In this day and age, we have to work harder than ever to get people to read books. We're inundated with video games, cell phones, movies, the internet. There's a million things out there that's distracting us. There was a point in time when the only thing that people had were books to read. So people could take their time to sit down and read a book that was over 1,000 pages long. The problem with today is you got books, you got movies and video games and cell phones. It's distracting kids. So we have to pull them in right away. And you want to make sure you do so with that opening line. Because if your opening line is weak, chances are you're going to lose the reader's attention. They won't want to keep reading. And think about it like when you want to buy a house. When you pull up into the driveway for a house for sale and you see how beautiful it is on the outside, all of a sudden you're now put into a positive state of mind. When you go inside of that house, you're now looking for reasons to buy the house. But if you pull into the driveway and the outside of the house looks awful, now you go inside of the house finding reasons not to buy the house. If the opening line of a book really grabs your attention, you're going to find yourself wanting to keep reading. However, if the opening line is boring or weak, chances are your interest all of a sudden begins to go away. And now you're going to find reasons to close the book and not come back to it. Think of your favorite book. Chances are you remember that opening line. Chances are it's that opening line that got you to read more and more of that book. Think about a book that you started and then you quickly stopped reading. Maybe you were in a bookstore and you saw a book, you picked it up, you opened it up and you read the first line or two, and all of a sudden you're distracted by something else. You find yourself putting the book down and walking away. So even you have proven to yourself how powerful the opening line can be to any book. Now, as a writer, you want to make sure that your opening line grabs people's attention and keeps it and gets them reading your entire book. But what you don't want to do is have a weak line that causes someone to want to close your book and walk away. What do you want to do with an opening line? You want to get the person reading to start wondering. They want to ask questions. Well, who, what, when, why, how? The more you can get the reader to start asking questions as fast as possible, the more likely they are to keep reading, because that's what makes us want to that's what makes us want to read a book, because we have questions we want answers to. As human beings, we can't walk away without answers. Once we start asking ourselves questions about anything, we want answers. And that is what a book is supposed to do. A book is supposed to create suspense. Suspense is not just for thrillers. It can be for any type of novel. A, Suspense is about getting people to ask what's going to happen next. As a writer, you want to get people to ask questions, the who, the what, the why. And if you can do this with your opening line, it's like fishing. You want to cast that line out there and get the fish's attention. You want them curious. If a fish looks at your bait and swims away, they're not going to come back. But if a fish looks at your bait and is curious, they're going to start following it. And that is what you want to do. You want to get people to start asking the who, the what, the why, the when with that opening line. Make it clever. Make it unique. Something that's going to catch someone's attention. You don't want it just a straightforward opening line that sounds dull or boring. You want an opening line that's almost like a tongue twister or a riddle or something unique. It's like when Charles Dickens said, it was the best of times, it was the worst of times. Something like that just makes you, it captures you, it makes you look twice. If your opening line can get someone to look twice and start wondering, You're pulling them into your novel. And that's the secret to getting someone to read your novel, is to get them to block out the rest of the world, to become emotionally invested. The more you become emotionally invested into a book, the more you're going to want to read it. You can't stop reading it. You want to know what's going to happen to these characters. In that opening line, if you can trigger emotions and thoughts in someone's mind with a unique line, that is, you're right off the bat, you've done something that the majority of writers don't do, and that is use that opening line to your advantage. By making it sound clever and unique, it pulls people in. All of a sudden, they stop thinking about what's going on in their life. They stop thinking of the cell phone. They stop thinking about video games and what's going on in the world. Now they become emotionally invested into your novel because of that unique opening line that you didn't throw away. Ask any writer, which part of the novel do you spend the most amount of time writing? And they'll probably tell you it's that last sentence in the novel and that first opening line. It can take a writer the same amount of time to create that opening and last line as it did to write the entire novel. They might rewrite that opening line a million times over. You would be amazed at how many professional writers will sit there all day staring at that opening line, asking themselves, is this the best line possible? An amateur writer will just write whatever comes to mind as quickly as possible, and then they move on, thinking that the bread and butter of the novel is the middle. The problem is that if you can't hook the reader at the beginning of the novel, how are you going to get them to care about the characters in the middle if you can't even get them through the beginning? A lot of famous professional writers will spend a tremendous amount of time writing that opening line because they know how powerful it is. Your goal as a writer is to come up with a line that is going to go beyond your novel. You look at Charles Dickens, it was best of times, it was worst of times. That line has gone beyond the world of novel writing, and it's a quote that people actually say today about life. They may not even realize they're quoting a book, but Charles Dickens wrote a line that was so powerful that even to this day, all these years later, people use that line to sum up life itself. As a writer, you want to be able to create a line that 100 years from now, people are using your very line to sum up something, sum up themselves, sum up life. Now that is a powerful opening line. Remember, you don't want to start off by just describing the background or where the story is taking place. You don't want to make it plain and boring. You want to have a line that captures emotion, captures the protagonist, how the protagonist is seeing something, how they are thinking and feeling. Maybe having your protagonist summing up something, summing up the novel. When you look at some of the greatest books ever written, the novel starts off with the protagonist either thinking or speaking or describing what they're seeing. We're immediately pulled into the protagonist's mind. We are now seeing through their eyes. We are now being introduced to their thoughts and emotions. What a lot of amateur writers will do is spend the first 2 or 3 paragraphs describing the location of a city or a forest, and then 2 or 3 chapters later, they're introducing the protagonist. The problem is that you might have lost the reader by then. But by focusing on the protagonist right away, and we can see and feel what they're thinking right at the very beginning with a very unique quote, that pulls the reader in right away. And as a writer, that's your goal. You want the reader connecting with the protagonist as fast as possible with a unique line that gets the reader asking questions. However, it is important to remember that when you're writing, you don't want to sit there and stare at your laptop trying to come up with that great opening line to a point where you just don't write anything. It is possible to write a novel and then go back to that opening line. Even if you do write a novel and the opening line is weak, that's fine. Just write your novel, get that first draft down. What you don't want to do is to have this amazing idea for a story in which you don't write anything because you can't come up with that memorable opening line. In the beginning, when you're writing your first draft, write down anything that comes to mind. So that way you can start actually writing your novel. And while you're writing it, you can always, in the back of your mind, when you're out for a walk, or maybe when you're not writing, you can just think about that opening line. What opening line can you put in there? And if nothing comes to you right away, that's fine. But just keep writing your novel and always look back to that opening line. Once you find the theme of your novel while you're writing, then the opening line might come to you. But a lot of great writers don't come up with that magical opening line. We don't know for sure whether or not Charles Dickens came up with the best of times or worst of times when he sat down to start writing his book right away. Maybe he did, or maybe he was halfway through his book when he thought of it and he went back and then changed it. So as a writer, you want to be able to do the same thing. You want to be able to write your novel, and even if you come up to the very end and then you come up with the opening line, that's fine. You can go back and add that opening line right then. You don't want to be staring at your laptop wanting that opening line, can't think of anything, so you just give up on that novel altogether. Write your novel and let the opening line come to you, even if it is a few weeks down the road after you started. Remember the 3 most important things. 1, you want the reader to feel. You want them to feel something. 2, you want the reader to be thinking. The who, the what, the when, the why. Something has to be triggered in the reader's mind. Questions. And the 3rd thing is, you want to be able to pull the reader into the story as though the story is happening to them, not to someone else. You want the reader to be pulled into the story as though they can look around their living room and feel as though the story is happening around them. They're not just passive reader, they are now have become the protagonist. Imagine an opening line to a book saying, "My death wasn't easy." All of a sudden, if you're in a bookstore, you're thinking, "My death wasn't easy." What does that mean? Well, why would someone say my death wasn't easy? Now all of a sudden you got the reader asking questions. Now the reader is going to want to keep on reading to understand, what did you mean by that opening line saying my death wasn't easy? How can a dead person be saying such a thing? And what did they mean my death wasn't easy? By one simple opening line, you get the reader asking questions. And by doing so, they keep on reading because they have to answer those questions. If you enjoyed watching this video, be sure to check out my website, where I have a ton of information that will help you become the greatest writer you can be. In fact, I'm going to leave a link in the description down below, where you can click on my website and visit it right now. If you enjoyed watching this video, be sure to check out my next video on how you can write a novel the same way a director would direct a movie. What do I mean by that? How can a director directing a movie help you with your novel writing? Well, I'm going to leave a link to that video right here, and you can click on it right now and have those questions answered.